Hi everyone, this is Tori Vandelin with Prevent Connect. This podcast is a continuation of Ashley's conversation with Jennifer Hirsch and Seamus Khan, authors of Sexual Citizens, a landmark study of sex, power, and assault on campus. This book consistently explores how power impacts sex and sexual violence, and this includes power based on identity and power within relationships. This episode explores ways that commonly used sexual violence prevention strategies have failed students with marginalized identities. Jennifer and Seamus also explore what lessons we learned from Sexual Citizens to create environments that protect those most marginalized from experiencing violence, and how the responsibility and opportunity to prevent violence expands across and beyond campuses. Part 1 of this podcast is also available on our website, so if you haven't listened yet, be sure to listen to episode 1 next.
So there's a chapter about perspectives of perpetrators. And one of the conclusions that you draw in that chapter is that people aren't having enough conversations about their ability, their right to choose the kinds of sexual experiences that they have. How can people who are doing prevention work promote respecting sexual citizenship and communication into the work that they're already currently doing?
One of the take-homes from the book is that this is everyone's job, that it's not just practitioners. But until everyone steps up, it really is going to fall, not just unfairly, but unfortunately, to just the practitioners who are doing this. And I think what's really critical for the prevention work that's happening right now is alliance building. And what are the sets of things that we can do to build alliances to construct policy change? And one of the things that we can do as a call to arms is to begin to really push the policy agenda forward. The way that we teach sex ed right now is partially like teaching young people how to drive by explaining to them the function of spark plugs. And instead of doing that, we need to think about how it is that we can push forward an agenda of comprehensive, age-appropriate sex education that begins very young and that continues moving forward, where educating people and building skills, like Jennifer just said, is a central aspect of that sex education.
So I think that was a really complete answer, and I would expand it even a little bit more, because I think that there are other alliances that we can think about building to address sexual violence. Of the Black women that we interviewed, we didn't speak with a single one who hadn't experienced unwanted sexual touching. And that's not just a sexual violence issue, that's a racial justice issue. And so reframing the work that we're doing as part of an intersectional project of social justice puts on our radar screen sort of a new set of alliances and a new way of thinking much more broadly about what kind of world we would need to build in order to address sexual violence.
Is there anything else that you can share around how students with more marginalized identities were experiencing things in the study?
One of the things that we know is that African Americans drink considerably less than whites. And we found that while drunken assault was fairly common, it was much more common within the white community. So a lot of the programming that we have on sexual assault deals with alcohol and sex. But as a consequence of that, we are often fundamentally underserving members of the Black community whose experiences of sexual assault more frequently happen in the context of relationships and are less likely to be experienced under the conditions of inebriation. So it's less likely to happen while people are drinking. And for us, racial justice is fundamentally tied to sexual assault prevention. As Jennifer said before, every Black woman that we spoke to had experienced unwanted touching, and the idea of just the availability of Black bodies to be touched was fairly profound and disturbing to us. We also found that people who experience precarity in general are at greater risk of experiencing assault. So we think a lot about how sexual geography matters, and that dedicated housing for first generation and low income students, for students of color, becomes really important because it gives them spaces that they have control over, which is really essential in our view. And so as we continue to build upon the work that we've been doing, recognizing these intersections, and importantly, how those intersections represent a wide range of different experiences, is going to be essential to our prevention.
You didn't just point to this idea of increasing empathy for others and their sexual citizenship, but you also spent a lot of time in the book critiquing the ways that institutions and other, structures that hold power. So do you have other ideas around like changing physical environments or social structures?
One of the reasons that younger students tend to go to spaces controlled by older students to party is because they don't have housing that's as nice. So making sure that first year students have housing that doesn't just smush them into double rooms, but that actually includes some social space that they can control, we would see that as sexual assault prevention, because it means that they're more likely to socialize with same year peers where they won't have those enormous power disparities. One of the changes that Columbia made, not just in response to the shift study, but in response to a sort of broader concern with student well-being, is to actually keep one of the dining halls open all night so that students would have a place to go and hang out after the party shut down. And I think that it's not like that one solution of late night French fries is going to prevent all sexual assaults, but it is part of building a campus environment where the default practice is less likely to be sexual assault.
I also think, in our experience here at Columbia, one of the things that's really powerful about this is that suddenly people who don't think that sexual assault prevention is their job feel empowered to do things that could help with sexual assault prevention. That there's a way to think about this in an empowering way rather than you're not doing enough. Just as we're trying to move young people away from shame, we're also trying to move communities away from fear and shame to try and empower them in positive ways to make a wide range of small changes that can help transform this context.
Mm-hmm. If you think about our big wins in public health, the ways that smoking rates have been reduced, or the ways that the tens of thousands of lives that have been saved in the fight against drunk driving, it's a multi-layered, complex response that produces those big wins. There's driver's ed, and there's road design, and there's car engineering. So it's not any one thing that has produced those better outcomes, but it's a whole series of solutions together. And it's time for a parallel level of effort to help young people grow up and to be sexual citizens.
So I'm wondering, how can folks maybe who aren't working on a college campus, but they're community practitioners, their parents, their teachers, how can they apply some of the key lessons of this book to really help lay a foundation for preventing sexual violence before and beyond the college years?
One of the greatest predictors of having experienced assault in a college or university setting is having experienced an assault in high school. In some ways, we're coming at this problem too late. We need to start this much, much earlier. And the lessons of sexual projects, sexual citizenship, and sexual geographies should be reinforced in college, not introduced in college. Talking about sex is really important. We can't expect young people to be able to express themselves when they're having sex if we constantly silence them every time they ask questions about sex.
From the moment your kids start to grow up, from the minute they can pump the swing by themselves, or the training wheels come off, or they can clean their own bottoms, they learn to make choices with their bodies. And sometimes they make choices with their bodies that are not the ones that you would like them to make. And we have a responsibility as parents to prepare them to make those choices in a way that don't hurt other people.
Thank you both so much for some of those. And I'm really grateful to the both of you for taking time out of your schedule to have this conversation. If there's any key takeaway for our audience, anything that you think that prevention practitioners should really be thinking about or concentrating on in terms of the work that we're doing?
One thing that I would surface, which I'm sure is on the mind of prevention practitioners, is self-care. The work was pretty hard to do, and it was really hard on our team. And we opened every meeting with a mental health check-in. We found, even in collecting the data and in working through them, that it was a lot to hold. And so I hope that as people can move this work forward, that they also make time to do what they need to do to stay strong.
I hope also that people know that the book is actually really filled with stories. The aim is to really pull back the curtain on people's everyday life experiences and to hopefully have young people read the book and see themselves and their friends in it and feel less alone, and that there are things that we can do to make sure that other people around us have more of those positive experiences and fewer of the ones that we either regret or we wish we'd never had.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I certainly did that for me. Folks who are really focused on prevention, I mean, many practitioners are also doing plenty of advocacy work as well. And so Jennifer, your point about self-care, we can't state that enough. It's so important to connect with each other and to really support each other in taking care of ourselves. But I think sometimes for me, I felt a little bit disconnected from the stories. And so it's another thing that I really loved about your book is that it connected me back to people's actual lived experiences, which is so important to keep in mind. You know, I mean, having survivors at the center of prevention strategies to be able to guide our work forward. So thank you both again so much. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, we hope it's the first of many.
Thanks for listening. There's no way to get all the wealth of knowledge from Sexual Citizens and its study into a brief podcast, and we hope these podcasts sparked inspiration for you and your prevention efforts. Check out the links on our podcast page on our website for opportunities to stay connected to this research.